If you're enjoying this podcast from us here at Which, then why not become a Which member? Right now, we've got a special offer, especially for podcast listeners, meaning you can choose any of our 3 membership tiers for 50% off the usual price. Starting at just £39.50 for a full year, you can get Which magazine delivered direct to your door. For the same price, you could also choose a digital Which subscription, giving you access to all of our product reviews, the Which app, and the digital edition of Which magazine. What's more, you'll also be able to use the Ask Which service for personalised one-to-one buying advice. Or why not get a full access Which subscription for just £49.50 for a full year? Don't forget, that's 50% off the usual price. To join Which or to find out more, just head to which.co.uk/podcast offer. That's which.co.uk/podcast offer, or click the link in the description for today's podcast for 50% off a Which annual subscription.
Hello, it's producer James here. Now, this week we're going to bring you an episode of the Money Podcast from our archives. And it's one that I think you're going to enjoy and really get into because it's all about pensions. And we always know pensions goes down very well with you at home. Now, this is an episode we originally brought to you back in December last year, just before Christmas. But it is just as useful now as it was then. It's all about how you can get access to your pension and exploring whether or not you know which method is right for you. So let's get into it. This is the podcast that I presented alongside Which Money editor Jenny Ross and Tom Selby from AJ Bell.
When life gives you questions, Which get answers.
Welcome to the Which Money Podcast, your weekly hit of money news and personal finance hacks to help make you better off. I'm James Rowe in for Lucia Ariano, and here's what's coming up this week.
Before 2015 and the pensions rule book was torn up, annuities were basically what you bought with your pension pot at the point of retirement. And buying an annuity basically involves swapping your savings for a guaranteed income for the rest of your life.
So if your provider offers Drawdown, then the process of setting it up can be really straightforward, but not all pension schemes will. So the first thing to do is to check if you're with a provider that offers Drawdown.
This week we're talking about pensions. Next year marks the 10-year anniversary since pension rules were overhauled, giving us more control over savings when we retire. But how straightforward are the options, and do you know which one is right for you? Well, joining us, we've got a mini dream team of experts. Firstly, Which Money editor Jenny Ross, hello.
Hello.
And Tom Selby, Director of Public Policy at AJ Bell. Tom, hello.
Hello, James.
Shall we start then by just outlining the basics? What are the different types of pensions you might have, Jenny?
Well, I think it's worth starting by saying that today we're not going to be talking about the state pension. Instead, we're going to be focusing on private pensions, so those that you set up either by yourself or via an employer and you pay into throughout the course of your career in the hope of ending up with a nice healthy pot of savings to fund your retirement. Now, within the private pension world, we basically have 2 broad categories: defined contribution pensions and defined benefit pensions. I know it all sounds a bit jargony, but we'll drill down into that. Defined contribution pensions are pensions that most workers today will have. It is basically where you pay into your pot, your employer might pay into it as well if it's a workplace scheme, and the amount you end up with depends on how many contributions you've made, as well as how the underlying investments have performed. Now, these defined contribution pensions have largely replaced what are known as defined benefit pensions, which are they're often referred to as gold-plated schemes, really, because they're a pretty good deal. When you retire, you will end up with a guaranteed income for life based on your salary. So they're increasingly rare. So today we're really talking about these defined contribution pensions.
And how do you know if you're sitting at home which type of pension you actually have?
The simple answer here is that unless you work in the public sector, it's unlikely that you'll have a defined benefit pension.
I think one of the big things around pensions is figuring out when you can get your hands on it. We often hear about the state pension. Jenny, you said that's not what we're talking about today, and obviously the age to get that is 66. But for private pensions, Tom, you can access them earlier if you want to.
Yes, that's right. So it slightly depends on the type of pension scheme you're in. So defined benefit pension schemes that Jenny mentioned earlier, you'll be able to access those from what's called the normal retirement age. So that'll be set by the scheme. It's usually state pension age, but can be a bit earlier than that. For defined contribution schemes, so when you build up your own pot of money, the what's called the normal minimum pension age, the minimum access age for those pensions is currently age 55. Now that is due to increase to age 57 from 2028. We're still waiting for details on exactly how that increase is going to be implemented, but at the moment you can get your hands on your pension if you want to from age 55.
You really stressed the word if.
Yes.
There. Should you be accessing your pension any earlier or at that age, or should you be almost trying to push it as far along as you possibly can?
So it depends on your circumstances. I'd say anyone who's considering accessing their pension in their mid-50s needs to think really carefully about the consequences of that decision. So firstly, if you're healthy and you're in your mid-50s, then you might need your fund to last for 40 years or more. So that'll mean that you'll need to manage your withdrawals in a very sensible way. And essentially what that will mean is if you take your pension at, say, age 55 rather than age 65, then you'll need to take a much lower income every year in order to make sure that pot lasts as long as you do. There's also tax things that you need to consider as well. So, for example, when you access taxable income from your pension, then you'll trigger what's called the money purchase annual allowance. So that means the amount that you can put into your pension each year goes down from a maximum of £60,000 to £10,000, and you also lose what's called the ability to carry forward up to 3 years of unused annual allowances to the current tax year. So there are tax implications from doing it. You also need to consider the sustainability of your withdrawals. And one final thing is that if you start accessing your pension earlier, then by definition that money won't be within that tax incentivised pension environment, and so it won't be able to grow over the long term as well. So you can do it, there's nothing stopping you doing it, but you just need to think really carefully if you're going to access your pension that early, because it's going to be difficult to sustain a decent standard of living for 35, 40, possibly 45 years.
We've done the different types of pensions. We've covered when you can access the money. What about how you access the money? Buying an annuity used to be the default method, right? How does that work?
Yes, before 2015 and the sort of pensions rule book was torn up, annuities were basically what you bought with your pension pot at the point of retirement. And buying an annuity basically involves swapping your savings for a guaranteed income for the rest of your life. As a result of the pension freedoms, when more options for accessing your cash became available, annuities really took a hit in terms of their popularity. But interestingly, in 2023-2024, sales of annuities reached their highest level in nearly 10 years. And that's largely to do with the rates massively improving. So the income that you get was much better, and that made them a lot more attractive. The income that you get is determined by the rate offered by the annuity provider that you choose. And of course, the value of the pension that you're using to buy the annuity. So let's say you have £100,000 in your pot and you're offered a rate of 5%, that would mean effectively around £5,000 a year as an income in retirement. You'll generally find that the older you are at the point of buying an annuity, the better annuity rate you'll get. And that's all to do with the fact that the provider is unlikely to have to pay out for as long because your life expectancy will be lower. And actually, if you have a serious health condition as well, you'll also get a better rate because of the same reason.
And just to get that clear then, they're only going to pay out for as long as you live then. So let's say you don't end up getting the full payout during the lifetime and say there's still £30,000 left over. Do you just effectively wave goodbye to that?
In most cases, annuity payments will stop when you die. There's nothing sort of left in the pot, as it were, to pass on. And actually, that's one of the reasons as well why annuities dropped in popularity, because there was another option for accessing your money, which we'll touch on shortly, which was a better way of passing money on to loved ones after you die. There is also a type of annuity called a joint life annuity. If you are particularly keen for payments to continue to your partner, say when you die, you can set it up from the outset to ensure that happens. But really it all comes down to the terms of the particular annuity that you choose.
Presumably then it's not going to be the choice for everyone. Are there any other downsides if you were to choose this option, Tom?
The big upside of an annuity is that it gives you a secure income for the rest of your life. That's that certainty which lots of people will value. The kind of opposite side of the ledger for that is it's inherently inflexible. So particularly if you're young, then so you say if you're in your mid-60s, maybe even your early 70s, and you're in good health, you might not want to lock into an income for life. If you wait later, as Jenny said, then you're more likely to get a better rate just because you're older, but you're also more likely to have health conditions which might mean that the provider will give you a better rate. And that's actually a really, really important thing with annuities. People can often be shy about declaring that they're a smoker or they're a drinker, or they have health conditions. Actually, this is a time to be really, really honest with your insurer because
it's going to benefit you,
right? It could give you thousands of pounds more income a year. So you absolutely need to be honest about those things. But yes, the thing with annuities is it is a one and done decision. So once you buy your annuity, you can't go back and change your mind. You're locked into that annuity and that's it. So you need to be really sure if you're going to convert either all of your pot or even a portion of your pot into an annuity that you're comfortable with the rate, that you've given the provider all those lifestyle factors and all those health factors that might affect your rate as well, and you're comfortable with the fact that you're giving up a chunk of your money and you won't get that money back and you're taking that income for the rest of your life.
And when we say, there's a lack of flexibility with this one, that's pretty hard and fast, right? You can't then go back and say, oh, well, actually, sorry, that is just, you've decided that that's the end of it, effectively.
Yeah. So there is a cooling off period. So I think it's a 30-day cooling off period after you've chosen to buy an annuity. But beyond that point, no. So you need to be absolutely certain in the decision that you're making, that you're comfortable with that decision in order to go ahead and hand your money over. For lots of people, it will be a really smart decision. It will make total sense. And actually, one of the important things in and around this debate is it's not a one or the other choice. So you can choose to annuitise part of your pot and you can choose to keep flexibility in drawdown, which I know we're going to talk about in another part of your pot as well. So there's ways to mix and match your income options to suit your needs.
Well, shall we just try and wrap up annuities for the moment? Because, Jenny, you did touch on there's different types of annuities. How do you choose the right one for you?
Yeah, there are probably a few key questions to ask yourself. I guess one important one is, do you want your payments to increase each year? Now, with what's called a level annuity, you will get a fixed amount each year for the rest of your life. The downside there is that obviously with inflation, the spending power of that money over time is going to go down. There is the option to inflation link your payments so that they do increase over time, or you could tie it to a specific percentage rather than inflation. It might sound like a no-brainer on paper, but actually the catch here is that payments will start off much lower than with a level annuity. And it could take actually as much as like 15, even 20 years for the overall income that you receive to exceed what you would have got had you chosen a level annuity. So yeah, pros and cons with that one. Another question to ask yourself is, do you want payments to continue to your spouse when you die? I think most annuities are taken out on a single life basis. So when you die, payments stop, end of. But you do have the option to set up a joint life annuity where payments will continue to your partner when you die at a percentage that you can fix it at the outset. So it might be, say, half the original amount that you were getting. But at least then you'll have peace of mind that, that your partner will be provided for when you go. The main message really with annuities is shop around. As with so many financial products, a lot of people don't. Unfortunately, they might, stick with their existing pension provider, just go with the easy option. But really, rates do vary across the market. Just it could make the difference of thousands of pounds ultimately over the course of your retirement. So shop around, make sure you're getting the best possible rate, and as Tom's already said, do declare any health conditions because that could again bump up your income.
Well, I think that's a good time to pause and take stock. After the break, we'll be analysing pension drawdown, revealing the providers we here at Which recommend, and whether or not you should consider cashing in your entire pension pot all in one go. We'll be back after this.
Saving for retirement can feel daunting. The same goes for managing your money once you've stopped working. That's why we've created an 8-week newsletter series breaking down what you need to consider, both pre and post-retirement, into bite-sized chunks. If you sign up to our free retirement newsletters, for 8 weeks we'll send you an email full of expert guidance to help you take control of your retirement planning and give you the confidence to make smart decisions. We'll help you get to grips with your pension, teach you how to boost your income, and explain more about care options. It doesn't matter when you sign up either. Your 8 weeks of advice will start whenever you sign up. So what are you waiting for? Head to which.co.uk/retirement newsletters, all one word, to get up to speed on everything you need to know for retirement.
Welcome back. Jenny and Tom are still with us, and before the break we talked about buying an annuity, but what if you want your payments to be a little more flexible? What are your options here, Jenny?
So this is where we come to pension drawdown, which we've alluded to a little bit, but this is an alternative to an annuity that is basically a much more flexible way of taking your cash from your pension. This is the big selling point with pension drawdown, right? It basically involves leaving your money invested and taking an income, withdrawing money from your pot as and when you need to. So unlike with an annuity, especially a level annuity where you're getting a fixed amount every year for the rest of your life, that might work great with some people. They might think, oh, phew, I've got some certainty about the money that's going to be coming in. With other people, they want to be able to vary their income to suit their circumstances, changing economic factors. With drawdown, you can do that. It's entirely up to you how much you take out of your pot from one year to the next. But of course, it's not without potential downsides as well, as with anything. Because you're leaving your money invested, on the one hand, that means that your pot has more opportunities to grow over the long term, but the reverse is also true. You are at the mercy of the markets, and if they're volatile, it could see your portfolio dropping in value. The absolute worst case scenario here is really that you run out of money altogether. That could be because you've taken out too much cash, or because your investments have underperformed, or a horrible combination of the two. So yes, there are risks involved, but it has become really popular because of that flexibility.
And I guess the reason it's become popular as well is the fact that this wasn't always available to everyone, was it, Tom?
Yeah, that's right. So drawdown did exist before the pension freedoms were introduced in 2015, but there were two versions. There was capped drawdown, which was available to people with lower value pensions, but that was quite restricted, and then you had to have a certain level of guaranteed minimum income in order to have the total flexibility. Since those pension freedoms were introduced, we've seen a complete upturning of the retirement income market. So as Jenny touched on earlier, before April 2015, almost everybody bought an annuity with their retirement pot, and actually the vast majority of people bought an annuity with their existing pension provider, which was a problem because they weren't always getting the best rate and they weren't always getting health conditions and lifestyle factors included. So since 2015, that's been completely overturned. We now see somewhere between 3 and 4 people enter drawdown for every annuity that's bought each year. So drawdown by far the most common route now for people taking a retirement income versus an annuity, although bearing in mind that some people will be mixing and matching their approaches, and you'll also have people who enter drawdown in the early years of retirement and then flip towards an annuity when they get a bit older as well.
And how do you actually go about arranging this? Again, are there costs to consider? Can you give us a bit of an overview of it all?
Yeah. So if your provider offers drawdown, then the process of setting it up can be really straightforward, but not all pension schemes will. So the first thing to do is to check if you're with a provider that offers drawdown. If you're not with a provider that offers that as an option, then you may need to consider transferring your pension to a provider that offers that as a retirement income option. Now that goes with all the usual health warnings about transferring your pension, that make sure there aren't any guarantees attached that might be valuable, or any exit fees that might hit the value of your pot before making that move. Now when you're choosing a provider for drawdown, exactly the same principle applies as for an annuity. You want to shop around for the best value provider because there'll be administration fees involved. There'll also be fees for buying investments, fees charged by fund managers as well. There'll be also be things like the service of the provider that will be important to a lot of people. The amount of content and information and guidance that you get as well will all be part of the kind of value for money package that people will want to consider when they're choosing a drawdown provider. But the good news is that unlike with an annuity, it's not a one and done decision when you move into drawdown. So you can choose a drawdown provider, you might stick with them for a year, you might decide actually I can see another provider over here that's maybe has lower fees or maybe has a better service or more choice, and you want to go for them. And it's very, very straightforward to transfer your money usually from one provider to another. Once you've chosen your provider, then in terms of moving into drawdown, it's just a case of telling your provider that you want to move your money into drawdown, you want to take a flexible income. When you take that decision, you'll trigger your access to your tax-free cash at that point in time. So you don't have to choose to put your entire pension fund into drawdown if you don't want to. So lots of people will choose to, what's called in the jargon, partially crystallise their pot. So they might decide to just put, say if you've got £100,000 pot, then you might decide to put £15,000 into drawdown in order to get £5,000 of tax-free cash out. That means the remainder of your pot and the tax-free cash that's attached to it can continue to grow and enjoy investment growth tax-free, obviously with the risk that can go up and down over the short term. So it's a very straightforward process in terms of moving from saving in retirement to turning your retirement income into a drawdown income.
But as you say, it's about shopping around, finding the right provider. And I guess one of the ways to do that, Jenny, is to read the Which website, pick up the latest Which Money magazine, because we've surveyed drawdown customers, haven't we, to find out which providers are the most highly rated. What can you tell us?
We have, yes, and as Tom mentioned, shopping around is really important, but it's not always that easy because providers have myriad different charging structures and fees and levels of service as well, which here at Which we obviously care a lot about. So in order to drill into this a little bit more, we surveyed nearly 2,000 drawdown customers a few months ago and carried out our own analysis of drawdown fees to find out which providers offer great value as well as excellent service. So that combination is really important. So to achieve our coveted Which recommended provider status, providers need a customer score of 70% or more, plus good star ratings in the customer survey, as well as competitive fees in our analysis. So any companies that have charges that are among the most expensive quartile for any pot size in our analysis, they don't qualify for that badge. So ultimately, after crunching all the numbers, taking on board all of the customer feedback, we've ended up with 4 recommended providers for pension drawdown. And Tom, you'll be very pleased to hear that AJ Bell is in the list. That would have been a bit awkward, wouldn't it? We've got AJ Bell alongside Vanguard, Royal London and Fidelity. And you can find out more about all of that analysis and really get into the numbers of, comparing costs for different pot sizes on our website. So if you go to which.co.uk/pension-drawdown.
I was going to ask you all the pros and cons of them all, but thankfully this is one of the things that's free to everyone. They can head to the website and we'll pop a link to that in the description of today's episode. And Tom, I guess with drawdown though, there is some admin to do, isn't there? Because when we looked at annuities, you almost know exactly how much money you're going to get. You can see how much money you have left over. But with drawdown, it can go up, it can go down. There's admin to sort of keep on top and make sure you're actually going to have enough money to keep you going, isn't there?
Yeah, so one of the benefits of an annuity is that you make the decision to annuitise and then there's nothing else that you need to do. With drawdown, you get that flexibility, but this isn't a one and done decision. You can't just leave your drawdown pot and hope that everything will be fine. It does require active engagement. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to be trading every day. It doesn't mean that you need to be looking at your portfolio even every day, but you do need to make sure that you've got regular reviews baked into your strategy. So we usually say at least once a year you want to be looking at your withdrawals, looking at how your investments have performed, making sure you're comfortable with both of those things, and crucially making sure that your investments haven't tanked or your withdrawals aren't so high, or both at the same time, that mean that you're risking running out of money too soon. Now, often that's a lot easier to do with a financial advisor. Not everyone can do that, but it's something that everyone needs to do. Everyone needs to engage with their pension pot and be ready, if they need to reduce their withdrawals if circumstances demand. Now, it can go the other way as well. So if your investments perform really well over a certain period of time, then actually you might be able to sustain slightly higher levels of withdrawals. But it's really important to do at least that annual check-in just to make sure that everything's going okay. But that doesn't mean you need to switch around your investments. It doesn't mean you actually need to do a huge amount. It's just making sure that you're on top of your portfolio.
Now then, annuities and drawdown are two of the options, but what about accessing your entire pot all in one go? Presumably it's possible, but I imagine it's a bit risky. I
mean, it is possible. You can cash in the whole thing in one go if you really like. And actually, rewinding to 2014, 2015 when the freedoms were announced, that was what was generating a lot of noise, wasn't it, Tom? It was, I think it was the then pensions minister, Sir Steve Webb, who conjured images of retirees splashing their cash on Lamborghinis and then not having enough to live on later in retirement. So yes, in theory it's possible, but you really need to think about tax. We've touched on this a little bit, but just to recap, however you plan to take an income from your pension, you can take 25% of it as a tax-free lump sum. There is a maximum there of around £268,000, but for most people that won't be relevant. And anything that you take above that 25% is then added to the rest of your income and taxed in the same way, basically. So if you take a substantial pension pot as cash in one go, 75% of that is going to be taxed at your usual rate. And of course, it could push you into a higher income tax bracket. So you could be losing tens of thousands of pounds of your pension to the taxman. Whether or not it's risky, I mean, yes, in the sense of a large tax bill, and yes, in the sense that potentially it could mean that you run out of money because you've blown it all, on
a Lamborghini.
On a Lamborghini, quite possibly. And you'll be able to save less into a pension if you still want to be contributing, as Tom mentioned at the top. Really, the decision about whether cashing in a whole pot is right for you, it completely depends on your circumstances. Interestingly, the number of people who are doing this, who are cashing in their pots in full, has increased quite significantly since 2015. But when you actually look at the numbers, you'll see that most of those are really relatively small. I think on average around £12,500. So that might, for some people, make up a really small part of their overall retirement savings, and they just want to get their hands on a chunk in one go. So really, it comes down to the tax bill that you're going to face. It comes down to the sustainability of the rest of your income. So you really need to look at these decisions in the round.
Well, you've given us a good overview of the options available and how you go about doing it and choosing what's right for you. But when do you actually need to be considering? Do I need to be thinking about it right now, or do you really need to be waiting until you're kind of getting to the age where you're going to start taking money out of your pension? Who wants to take this first, Tom?
I'd say when you're leaving primary school. No, I'm joking. Usually you would say that you need to consider what you're going to do with your retirement pot around 5 years before you're going to access the money. So before that, you're thinking about accumulation, so building up your retirement fund as large as you can, so you've got that tax-efficient pot to draw from. And then when you get to around 5 years before access, the question is, are you planning to annuitise some or all of that pension pot? If you are planning to do that, then what you'll probably want to do is take some of the investment risk out of your portfolio. You'll want to hedge that money so that it's hedged against annuity rates, so that you've got a more certain target that you're aiming for. Now, if you're planning to go into drawdown, then it's less likely that you'll really need to do that. You may want to choose to de-risk your pot a little bit, particularly if you're planning to take your tax-free cash. But actually, the point at which you access your pension in drawdown, say if you're going to access it at age 65, you might still have another 25, 30 years plus to go, particularly if you're healthy. So there may be no particular need for you to reduce the risk in your fund. The one thing you might want to think about when you're actually at the point of entering drawdown is, you'll probably want some cash in your fund because you want to pay yourself an income, and you won't necessarily want to be selling down your investments when you're doing that, and B, you may want to consider moving towards investments that deliver an income, because for most people who are in drawdown, that's what they're wanting to do ultimately, is have a fund that delivers an income that can sustain them throughout their lives. So a couple of things that you'll need to think about, but if you're moving into drawdown, there won't necessarily need to be a big change in your investments versus what you were doing when you were building up a retirement pot.
And Tom mentioned this before. I briefly touched on financial advisors. Is that something worth considering, or is this going to be for somebody who's got a sizable pension pot?
In a word, yes. Financial advice is definitely worth considering, but the problem in reality is that costs money, and for many people that is too big a barrier. And so actually the latest figures from the regulators show that less than a third of people accessing their pensions took advice in the most recent financial year, and cost is the big reason behind that. So the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, is looking at ways to make advice more accessible to pension savers, because after all, this is a huge decision. You know, it could make the difference between a comfortable retirement and a retirement where you're really struggling to make ends meet, all to do with, you know, whether or not the decisions about how you've accessed it are right for you in the first place. So hopefully there will be some positive change on that front. You know, you'll be seeing more affordable advice. But in the meantime, I think I'd just remind everyone that there are free options available, not your sort of full-fat personalised advice, but there is a middle ground known as guidance, where you can just get a clearer overview of your options and what they involve. And there is a government service called PensionWise that offers that service. You can get hour-long appointments, either I think it's phone, online, and face-to-face if you're 50 or over and have a defined contribution pension. So yeah, definitely take advantage of that, especially if you're struggling to afford financial advice. And of course, just a reminder that if you are a Which Money member, you also get access to one-to-one guidance from our money experts as part of your membership, so they can also help you understand your options when it comes to turning your pension pot into an income.
And right now is a very good time to become a Which member if you're not already, because we have an offer for 25% off an annual Which Money membership that runs till early January. We'll pop a link in the show notes for you to check that out. Before I let you both go, any word on the pensions dashboard?
Oh my gosh, it's become a running joke, hasn't it? I've actually completely lost track, Tom, if I'm honest, of when I've got 2026.
So 2026. So the serious answer is 2026 is the point in time when all pension schemes will need to connect to the central money and pension service dashboard. So the government said it's going to prioritise that centralised dashboard first, but what we don't know, and there's another acronym coming your way, and I apologise, is when the DAP will be, the dashboard availability point. So once we know the dashboard availability point, there will be given 6 months notice of when that will happen. If we presume that won't be before all the data's in there, it's probably, if we're lucky, going to be at some point in 2027, which is ever so slightly later than it was first promised.
Wow,
don't hold your breath, listeners. I think in the meantime, be prepared to do your own legwork when it comes to getting on top of your pensions and checking how much is in each one.
Well, Jenny, Tom, I think we've covered all bases there, so thank you so much for coming on the show.
Cheers. Thanks, James.
Well, a huge thanks again to Jenny and Tom for coming on the show today, and to you for listening to this week's episode of the Which Money podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please do hit subscribe to make sure you catch our new episodes as soon as they drop. For daily money news and advice, you can find us on social media at Which Money and online at which.co.uk/money. And we also have a free money newsletter, which is delivered to your inbox every Monday. To sign up, visit which.co.uk/money newsletter. This episode of the Which Money podcast was produced and presented by me, James Rowe, and recorded by Samra McCarrath.
Every year, Which tests thousands of the products that you rely on every day. And we've been doing it for over 60 years.
Which reviews are 100% impartial. We don't accept freebies from manufacturers, and we have no owners, shareholders, or government departments to answer to. So our work is on behalf of you, the consumer.
In a world of misleading claims and fake reviews, we test everything, from everyday items to big purchases, so that you don't have to.
We then put them through tests and assessments that go beyond the accepted standard to work out how well these products work for you and what's not worth your money. And a Which membership not only gets you access to our reviews, it also funds our non-profit campaigning work, like getting scam ads banned on social media and ending broadband and mobile mid-contract price hikes. And right now, podcast listeners can become a Which member for 50% off the usual price by heading to which.co.uk/podcast offer.